Welcome to the 2022 MEOPAR ASM. I'm Ryan, and I'll be sharing some recent updates about the Resiliency platform on behalf of our research team at UBC, headed by Dr. Stephanie Chang. For those who aren't familiar with the platform, let me give you a quick introduction before exploring some of the big changes that we've implemented over the past year. Resiliency is a free online platform designed to facilitate hazard risk reduction knowledge exchange between coastal communities in Canada. The platform helps community representatives to identify peer communities from across the country that face similar hazard threats and community vulnerability profiles. From there, they can explore the actions that their peers have taken to address coastal hazard risk, get a sense of the state of practice around hazard risk reduction in Canada, and establish a foundation on which to build their own hazard resilience strategies. Our database currently contains data for 179 communities across 7 provinces. We have hazard exposure data for 5 coastal hazards, including coastal and riverine flooding, earthquakes, tsunamis, and contaminant spills. And we have over 3,800 risk reduction actions that we've collected and processed. You can start reviewing these right now by visiting Resiliency at resilient-c.ubc.ca. The Resiliency platform first works by establishing community hazard exposure for our 5 coastal hazards. Next, we determine community hazard vulnerability profiles using a set of indicators across 5 different capitals: economic, social, built environment, natural environment, and institutional. Finally, we collect and classify the risk reduction actions these communities have taken to address these hazards. Each action is classified by the type of action taken, which stage of the process they are in, and which long-term strategies they address. The platform uses a set of 25 hazard vulnerability indicators to help determine which communities are most similar. These are broken into 5 capitals: economic, social, built environment, natural environment, and institutional. Source data for our indicators includes the 2016 census, election and financial reports, business location points, digital elevation models, land use and land cover layers, and a set of custom geospatial measures. We believe anyone responsible for disaster risk reduction planning and climate change adaptation for coastal communities in Canada can benefit from using Resiliency. This includes community planners, engineers, disaster management planners, and researchers and NGOs working in disaster risk reduction in Canada. 2021 was a big year for Resiliency, with a summer release focused around expanding our geographic coverage into Quebec, Manitoba, and Newfoundland, while also adding additional communities in BC and Nova Scotia. We updated the national exposure data for earthquakes and tsunamis, implemented new and updated community actions data for communities in BC and Nova Scotia, updated our indicator data to bring it to be more current for several hazard vulnerability similarity indicators, and implemented our initial set of user interface and user experience updates to the platform based on feedback from our 2021 usability study. Our team has collected over 2,000 actions from community plans, bylaws, regulations, and climate adaptation plans for our platform communities. Each of these actions is assessed to determine which hazard or hazards they seek to address, the categories that they fall into, and whether they are groundwork or active policy implementations. In this first set of charts, you can see that over 93% of these actions focus entirely or in part on addressing either coastal or riverine flooding. Floods are a common and significant threat to coastal and non-coastal communities alike across the country. Earthquakes are addressed by approximately 12% of our community plans, most commonly in southern BC and on Vancouver Island. Actions addressing tsunami and contaminant spill threats represent roughly 7 and 8% respectively. Nationally, 40% of these actions are technical studies or similar actions that only lay the groundwork for future work, while a full 60% represent implemented structural or policy projects. We use 8 categories to classify how these actions seek to address hazard risk or community resilience building. Land use approaches are by far the most common, used by nearly all types of communities across all regions of the country. Technical studies, which include hazard and vulnerability assessments, risk mapping, and monitoring efforts, are also very common, again being used by nearly all types of communities across the country. Construction guidelines and finance and insurance options tend to be the least used tools to address coastal hazard risk. Finance and insurance in particular tends to be used by only the largest of communities. As we look towards the future, The final version of the Resiliency platform will be released in March of 2022, continuing the work we've been doing over the past year to produce a stable foundation for our research and community outreach. Some key features of this version include newly published research reports, new communities in Quebec, bringing total community count to around 185, updated national exposure data for flooding and contaminant spills, final community actions data for our original BC communities, final user interface and user experience updates to the platform based on feedback from our 2021 usability study, and French translations for research reports and some additional site features. If anything you've seen here looks interesting, we'd encourage you to use the link or the QR code on screen to start exploring resiliency for yourself. On behalf of our entire research team, thank you for taking the time to learn more about the Resiliency platform.